Good evening and welcome to the Youth in Government Gubernatorial Debate. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You'll be hearing from three candidates, all vying for that governor slot at Youth in Government 2022. Tonight, we're joined by Governor Jackson Hoppy, who will serve as this evening's moderator. Without any further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Hoppy.
Hello, my name is Jackson Hoppy, and I'm the 68th Youth in Government Governor, and I'll be moderating the debate tonight. I'd like to wish a warm welcome and the best of luck to each of the candidates. I'd also like to thank each of you for participating in this debate. We will now move on to the opening statements. The first one to do their opening statement will be Mr. Samuel Payne.
Hi, I'm Sam Payne, and I'm running to be your 69th governor. I go to West High School in Knoxville, and I'm running on a platform of increased access to high-speed internet, state-sponsored food assistance, and higher investment in our public education. I believe that if we increase funding for broadband internet infrastructure, we will not only create tens of thousands of jobs for the state, but we will also increase access to the internet in rural areas, something that this past year has shown us is a truly integral part of our society. In my experience volunteering in East Tennessee, many people, especially in rural areas, lack the necessary access to a stable supply of food. For many, it is hard to make ends meet during the winter, and by increasing their access to social programs, we can hopefully minimize their struggle. I've been attending MUN and YIG since freshman year, and while the Zoom conferences are nowhere near as enjoyable as they are in person, they've still been a good experience, and I hope to make this next conference memorable. That being said, I'm extremely excited for the prospect of an in-person conference next year, especially if it means serving you as your governor. Thank you.
Next, Aaron Chadha.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming. My name is Aaron Chadha, and I'm running to be your 69th governor. Y'all can giggle here for a second, but let's get back. And I hope you can use this debate to make you more confident in your choice for the governor of YIG 2022. And I sure do hope that it's me, but whoever it is, I am confident that they will be great leaders. Moving to my platform, here's the deal, guys. The truth is, by voting for me, you aren't voting for just Aaron Chadha. You're voting for an era of bipartisanship. Today, we're more divided than ever before. And if we want our great union to have a prosperous future, we need to once again unite. That is my goal, and that is my platform. And that is going to be our reality under my leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Chaplin once said, we have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives us abundance has left us in want. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity, and that humanity is what I'm going to fight for. With me as your governor, this isn't going to be Aaron's YIG or Susan's YIG. It'll be our YIG, for the people, by the people. We will do what's right, not because it's easy, but because it is hard. We will do what it takes, and we'll go the extra mile. We'll once again fight for humanity, and together we'll plant the seeds of a change that our kids and their kids after.
We will finally move on to Ms. Molly Volker.
Hello, my name is Molly Volker. I am currently a junior at Franklin High School, and this year I am serving as your Commissioner of Education. I want to start off by thanking Susan, Elise, and Tyler, and everybody else at the TNCCE who have worked so hard to give us this unique opportunity. 2 years ago, I attended my first Youth in Government conference. I remember simultaneously feeling so lucky to be surrounded by such high-achieving and intelligent individuals, and also feeling sort of out of place amongst these massively intimidating and capable young people. At that time, I never would have imagined I'd have the courage to do what I'm doing right now. I am running because I have a clear vision for Tennessee. I see a Tennessee where people feel supported and stood with through these inconsistent and chaotic times. I see a Tennessee that runs on clean energy, and a Tennessee where every child has equal opportunity to a fantastic education. I see a Tennessee filled with all different kinds of people from all different backgrounds, united for the good of one another. I see a Tennessee full of progress, unity, and strength. I see a Tennessee that can and will exist, and I believe that I am the right candidate to set us on that path. I hope you do too. Thank you.
And with that, the time for the opening statements has elapsed, and we will now move on to my questions as the moderator. Our first question has to do with the COVID-19 pandemic and vaccinations. As of today, Tennessee ranks 44th in the nation in the percentage of vaccines that have been distributed. This can most likely be attributed to mass misinformation about the pandemic and the vaccine, as well as general hesitation to get vaccinated. As governor, what is your plan to curb the spread of this misinformation and to increase the number of vaccines administered? Our first respondee will be Mr. Aaron Chadha.
COVID has surprised us. It has challenged us to our core. And let me tell you something, we have all lost something. Some have lost family members, some have lost money, and I can bet all of us have lost memories. These memories we can never get back, but what we can do is make sure that the future is full of prosperous memories, memories that make up for the lost ones, memories that make up for the lost ones. And I know I said it twice, but there's a reason for it. We can't compensate or fix what already happened, but we can secure the future. It is our responsibility to be good citizens, to make sure that our loved ones and the loved ones of our neighbors and their neighbors are safe. And that's what I'm going to go for. I'll make sure that there's awareness about the vaccine. Can you believe that the United States has the most number of people who don't believe in evolution? It's not because they don't know any better. It's because they haven't been taught. And that's what I'm going to do. COVID is just the beginning. There are going to be multiple diseases that are going to come after it. We can't force you to put your vaccine, but we can tell you how important the vaccine is. We can make the vaccine accessible, and we can teach people that vaccines matter, that wearing a mask matters. Because what you do today doesn't just help you, it helps your community for generations to come. So together, let's solve COVID. Let's make a difference.
Our next respondent will be Ms. Molly Volker.
As the governor stated, according to new information from the CDC, Tennessee ranks 44th among states in the percentage of people 65 and over with at least one COVID vaccine at 62.3%. This is the result of a general feeling of uncertainty and distrust of the vaccine. To assure Tennesseans that the vaccine is safe, positive, and necessary, I would set up an information campaign with easily accessible information on the health department website so that citizens can have their questions answered. This would feature a Q&A forum for any citizens who still have questions or concerns. An additional problem is that although many Tennesseans are eligible for the vaccine and have a distribution site nearby, the process of making an appointment for the vaccine online is convoluted and difficult, and almost impossible for certain elderly people who don't understand how to use the internet. To combat this, I would set up a government-funded phone line to help elders book their appointments. The line would be automated with different extensions depending on the need of the caller and whether they simply need someone on the other end to walk them through the registration process, or if they are entirely unable to fill out the form themselves, they would be supported on the other line by their state government. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Payne.
So I agree with everything that was just said, but I believe that the issue boils down to 2 points. One, a lack of trust in the vaccine, which we can solve or try to solve through information campaigns that target the groups that are the least likely to accept the vaccine. But what I think is the truly most important issue is a lack of places to get the vaccine. When I received my first dose, I had to drive across the county, and that's just not accessible for a lot of people. So I believe that it is our duty to expand availability, expand where it is available, and expand it to more population groups. This morning, the Pfizer vaccine we learned was safe for everyone 12 and up. So I believe that we should move quickly to increase availability to school-age children. Thank you.
We will now move on to the next question, which has to do with education after or post the pandemic. Tennessee currently ranks 31st in the nation in K-12 education, with our educational system taking a massive hit during the pandemic due to school closures and the advent of online learning. How would you bring about a recovery for our educational system, as well as ensure that schools are safe as the pandemic ends and post-pandemic? Our first respondee will be Ms. Molly Volker.
According to Tennessee Commissioner of Education Penny Schwinn, recent studies have shown significant losses in especially math and early reading skills caused by the instability of learning in the pandemic. Students deserve to be supported in their education and deserve to be on equal level with their peers. As governor, I will allocate a significant portion of the budget to provide schools with funds designated towards improving academic stalling and loss during the pandemic. Obviously, different schools need different things, and each school will have the authority over how to improve the academic situation within their institution. But I would also establish a committee to oversee the allocation of these funds and ensure that they were being used effectively. Additionally, I know what it's like firsthand to be in a place where you don't necessarily feel safe. So I will also work with the Department of Health to ensure that there is oversight by the government in our public schools to make sure that our COVID protocols are being enforced. It is vital that we have students in schools, but it is also vital that our students are safe. And I think that the only way to do that at this point is to make sure that there is someone enforcing those COVID protocols and making sure that they are being enforced within our public schools. Thank you.
Our next respondee will be Mr. Sam Payne.
I believe that education has a long way to go in Tennessee. As my fellow candidates and the governor have said, Tennessee ranks among the lowest in education in the country. And we also rank among the lowest in teacher pay, teacher compensation. So what this promotes is a type of talent drain to states where, teachers are paid more. So I believe that if we increase teacher pay, we can begin retaining these excellent teachers that we are losing to other states. On top of that, the mental health of school children has rapidly decreased during the pandemic. So I agree with what Governor Lee is currently doing, and we need to increase school access to mental health care. That's an integral part of our school system, seeing as that suicide, I believe, is the second leading cause of death among kids above the age of 10. So overall, the state needs better infrastructure for this. As we've seen, a lot of the rural areas lack the internet infrastructure to effectively do online school, which is a necessity during the pandemic. So through increased investment in broadband internet, we can hopefully remedy these problems. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Chadha.
Education is the future, ladies and gentlemen, and it is so disheartening to see that we aren't doing as well as we should be. There are two ways to look at this. First, we need to fix the damage that has been done through COVID-19. And second, we need to tackle why our schooling system isn't successful at its core. Because it's not like Tennessee has suddenly plummeted in the rankings because of COVID. We just aren't there because we haven't had right policies in place. People think by throwing money into the education system, we can help make kids learn. That's not what they need. Mr. Payne said it so eloquently. We need support. Support is what we need. And that's what I'm going to go for. In order to make sure that our kids are well educated, I'm going to give them the support that they need through mental health programs, through physical health programs, through programs that make them feel wanted, to make them feel appreciated. And the second facet of that is coming back from this online school mess. Some of the schools did a phenomenal job, and some others not so much. We need to make sure to do two things. First, gauge where the kids stand, not just shove them into the next grade and start testing them on the subject that they were supposed to know, because they might not know it anymore. And second, what I'm going to do is make an after-school accelerator program statewide, which means there's going to be teachers who are going to stay after school to make sure that these kids are caught up with school so that they can make sure that they are successful in school. That's what we need to do.
And with that, we will now move on to our next question, which has to do with public transit and infrastructure. The recent February snowstorm and March floods in Middle and West Tennessee have caused roads to deteriorate and our infrastructure in these areas to be crippled. This includes huge potholes on major interstates, homes and neighborhoods still having damage, and people still not having a safe and effective way to travel without a car. How would you address the effects of these natural disasters as well as improve the current public transit and infrastructure? Our first speaker will be Mr. Chadha.
So let's start with natural disasters. For a disaster, it's in the name. What can we do to make sure that our citizens feel safe after these disasters? The biggest thing, information, ladies and gentlemen. Tell them what to do during a storm, where to go during a storm. Make infrastructure so that they can go to places during a hurricane. We have hurricanes in Nashville almost every year. These people need places to go to. They need to know where they can go. But second, let's look at public transit. We are so fortunate to be alive in an era of technology. Lyft and Uber are making rideshare so convenient. We have metros, we have buses, but they're often inefficient. So we need to harness technology. We need to invest in self-driving cars. My vision is not of something that's going to happen in 2 years. My vision is to start Tennessee on a path that we can be completely autonomous in the next 20 years. And you know what that means? I can order a car to drop me from my house to the work, an electric autonomous car, which drops me to my work, but then goes back and takes someone else to the grocery store, then goes back and takes someone else to the hospital. We can make sure we don't waste fuel. Our cars are constantly moving. Invest in electric cars. Give tax rebates. The solution isn't by just splurging money on public transport. We've seen that in Atlanta. It does not work. People feel unsafe. They want a car. What we can do is make sure we make the car efficient. What we can do is make sure we make the journey safe.
Our next speaker will be Mr. Payne.
I completely agree with what Mr. Chada said. The electrification of cars in Tennessee should be one of our utmost priorities. And while the infrastructure across the state is failing, we also need to remember that according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, we are doing better than average. Now, while that does say something about the state of the roads nationally, when you compare our infrastructure and public transit to our peers internationally, it is a horrid sight. We completely lack public transportation in most major metropolitan areas, and we lack any public transportation between those. So what I believe we need to do on top of prioritizing electric cars is we need to invest in municipal light rail between major metropolitan areas like Nashville, Knoxville, and Memphis to allow the exchange of goods and services and for people to be able to commute between these two places at a low cost, low carbon option. Thank you.
And finally, Ms. Volker.
Tennessee's public transit and infrastructure are necessary parts of the success of our state. As governor, I will prioritize funding towards repairing the more rural infrastructure that has been neglected, and I will work closely with the Tennessee Department of Transport to determine where the biggest problems are with the current infrastructure system so that they can have long-term fixes in the future. I will also support the expansion of rural broadband so more Tennesseans have access to the internet, which is especially important during COVID as Tennesseans need to have the option of remote work. This will also keep our citizens informed of the effects of natural disasters that are potentially dangerous. I will also expand public transit access in major cities, as public transit has many benefits such as relieving traffic, reducing air pollution, and giving people who don't own cars a way to get around their city. Cars are very expensive, and public transit is a good and affordable option for the people of our state to get where they need to go. Thank you.
Mr. Chada has elected to use his rebuttal.
While I do agree where Molly is coming from, and it's a great idea that we should invest more in public transport and internet, as she said. But I think what we lack right now isn't that we don't have enough public transport, because we can see that across the country, there are only a few cities where public transport has been efficient. Public transport isn't going to work in Nashville because it hasn't worked in any southern cities. They have invested billions of corrupt dollars, which have ended up going through these big agencies, making them a lot of money, but the impact has been negligible. What we need to do, and I would agree here with Sam, is that invest in electrifying our future. It's a great place where she's coming from, and I can completely see why she thinks that. But the time has changed, and this is our future. Let's invest in the future and not be stuck up on something that was relevant 20 years ago. Let's be the change. Thank you.
Mr. Payne, you have elected to use your rebuttal. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd respond to Mr. Chada's point. While I do agree that electrifying the car is necessary, we can't ignore public transport. Public transport is by far the most carbon efficient mode of transportation. And just because it hasn't worked in other southern cities does not mean it hasn't worked in other cities around the world. In places in Europe and places in China, cities of moderate size have robust, developed public infrastructure, public transport networks, and that has been a great benefit to them, improving access for low-income citizens and just overall providing a low carbon alternative.
And with that, we will now move into our next question, which has to do with voter turnout. 68% of active and inactive registered voters cast ballots in person during early voting and on election day or absentee by mail in the November 3rd presidential election, breaking previously established records. How would you maintain this high voter turnout percentage heading into the 2022 midterm elections, and how would you hope to increase it further, especially amongst Generation Z? Our first speaker on this question will be Ms. Volker.
I think that that one of the reasons why voter turnout was so high in this last election is because of how politically charged it was and how much we were hearing about it. And, we need to maintain that in the, calmer elections and in the more, state-centric elections. In the most recent gubernatorial election in Tennessee in November of 2018, voter turnout was 54.46%. In order to ensure that all citizens of our state are represented in government, we must work to heighten our voter turnout. As governor, I will establish a commission to investigate any legislation that might be contributing to voter suppression, as well as support more convenient voting methods such as early voting, absentee ballots, etc., which, worked in this last election, for those who don't have the opportunity to vote on election day or in person. I will also support voting rights for the formerly incarcerated, as everyone deserves to be equally represented. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Mr. Chada.
I couldn't agree more with Molly. That's so true. Everyone deserves a voice. We are the greatest democracy in the world for a reason, and not because we don't listen to someone who made a mistake when he was 18 years old. It's because we listen to everyone, and in the past few years, we have lost that vision. Let's bring it back. Let's make sure every American has a right to vote, no matter what their past is, because their past does not define their future, and that future is what we need. So how are we going to tackle this? As she said, let incarcerated people vote. We can never it's unlikely that we're going to replicate the turnout that happened in this presidential election because the two sides were so polarized. But what we can do is put us on a journey so that the youth, while they're really vocal, who don't vote, come out and vote. It's because they're so busy. We need to use blockchain to make sure online voting is a thing. Make sure we can't get hacked. Absentee ballots, voting by mail. There are 1,000,001 ways we can make sure people vote. Add more mailing booths. Something that I do want to do that no one has mentioned is start buses. On election day, I want to run buses all throughout Tennessee to nearest voting stations for free so that everyone can have their voice heard. Because we aren't America because 5% of the people can vote, because 50% of people can vote. We are America because we all can vote. It's our right and we should do it.
Our final speaker for this question will be Mr. Payne.
I could not agree with Mr. Chada's point on the implementation of blockchain technology more. It really will serve as an opportunity to expand voter turnout. I personally believe that the voter turnout we saw in this past election should not be the goal. Our goal should be pushing voter turnout into the 80s and the 90s. And through the expansion of blockchain technology, but more immediately through a mandated increase in number of polling places. We've seen across the country that underserved communities, minority and low-income communities, are underserved in proportion to higher income communities. So I think that we need to mandate a doubling of the number of polling places in each county with an emphasis to try and remedy the disparities seen between communities. Thank you.
With that, we'll now move into our fifth and final question of the night, which has to do with climate change. Flash floods and urban flooding, like those which were recently seen in Middle Tennessee at the end of March, are directly linked to heavy rainfall, which can come as a result of climate change, thus showing its devastating effects on our state. What would you do and what policies would you support in order to fight climate change in our state? Mr. Payne, you will be our first speaker.
Climate change will probably become one of, if not the defining challenge of our time. It poses intense struggles in not just far-flung areas of the globe, but also here in the United States, even in Tennessee. As mentioned earlier, severe flooding and strong storms have become the norm in Tennessee and are set to even grow in intensity in the coming years as a result of climate change. On top of this, intense droughts and higher summer temperatures will lead to increased crop failures. These things seem foreboding, but we can face them. Even though the state of Tennessee cannot solve these global issues alone, we are obligated to do our part for the betterment and stability of humanity. The most efficient way for us to achieve meaningful results is to move the state to a carbon neutral energy grid and begin the research into and installation of bleeding edge carbon capture technology. Growing investments in wind, solar, hydro, and even nuclear power is key to success. These benefits also expand to the workforce with a propensity to create tens of thousands of new, well-paying jobs. We cannot do it alone, but we can set an example of how to find effective solutions for complex problems. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Ms. Volker.
Climate change is a worldwide pressing issue that must be addressed now. The people of Tennessee are facing immediate danger from this threat. There is much evidence to support the fact that carbon emissions are the worst cause of climate change. In 2017, Tennessee ranked 18th in carbon emissions in the United States, with 97.6 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emitted. As governor, I will support legislature encouraging limits on carbon emissions, set goals on lowering carbon emissions in our future, and as my fellow candidates stated, advocate for more eco-friendly energy options, which there are many. I will also work with the Department of Environment and Conservation to protect and improve the quality of Tennessee's natural resources which have been negatively affected by climate change, both for the sake of the rich wildlife of our state and for the health and safety of the people. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Chapa.
Molly did a tremendous job, and so did Sam. They are such a good governor candidates, and I'm so glad that I have the opportunity to work alongside them. And they brought up some really good points. Climate change is going to displace hundreds of millions over the next 20 years, killing tens of millions. But we can wish that we want to change the world, but the reality is change starts at home and change starts today. If I become your governor, I'm going to do a couple of things. First off, I'm going to push for every Tennessee person to vote for people who support the Green New Deal. It may be far-fetched and it may be expensive, but it is the dramatic change we need. We can't do little things. We can't inch forward. We have miles to go, and we can't do that by walking 1 foot. We need to start running. We need to start sprinting, and that sprint is what I'm going to lead. I'm going to make sure that our state is carbon neutral in the next 3 years. That means we are planting enough trees to offset our carbon expenditure and the carbon use. Next, I'm going to have tax incentives on solar panels, something that California did so well. Tax incentives on putting solar panels in your home. So you're not only making sure that you aren't wasting energy and putting emissions into the air, you're also making excess electricity that your neighbor can use and their neighbor can use. And I'm also going to give huge tax incentives on electric vehicles. One, it's going to make people more accessible to drive so that they can go and live in suburban areas and buy cheaper houses, but it's also going to save the environment.
With that, all of my questions have been answered, and we are done with the moderator question section, and we will now move into the concluding statements. Mr. Chada, you will deliver your closing statement first.
Hi guys, hello again, how are you? It was a tremendous debate, and I had such a good time talking to everyone here. And Governor Hoppy, as usual, had some tremendous questions for us. But these questions aren't what you're gonna vote for. No one votes for questions. But you're gonna vote for answers. And those answers are what I'm gonna give. I'm here to tell you that I don't know everything, but I do know one thing, that I know nothing. I'm not telling you that I know how to solve climate change, nor am I telling you how I know how to solve our education problem. You know what I do know? I do know that I can get the people who know this stuff. My leadership is not going to be the leadership of people who think that they know something. My leadership is going to be delegating these responsibilities to people who actually know these things. And as for YIG, the one thing I can tell you is I'm going to make it fun. It's going to be fun. It's going to be our YIG, and we're going to leave an impact. We're going to make this YIG so memorable that people 10 years from now are going to look back and say, dang, YIG 22 was something else, right? And
with that, we will now move on to Mr. Payne.
I would like to start out by thanking all of my fellow candidates, Governor Hoppy, as well as Susan, Elise, and Tyler for making this debate possible. I think that on balance, we all agree on the steps necessary to achieve success in Tennessee. I hope that you will support not only me, but all of us as a whole in our mission to bring Tennessee into a stable future. Climate change should be at the core of our policy decisions, and I can guarantee you that any and all policies I implement will have this issue at the core. So I'd like to thank everyone for watching tonight, and I would like to especially thank the 5 people who watched this debate all the way through. But I would also like to commend the rest of you who left me on this white noise. Thank you.
And finally, Ms. Volker.
Again, I want to thank Elise, Susan, Tyler, and everyone else at the TNCCE for allowing us this great opportunity. I also want to express my gratitude to my fellow candidates for handling this debate with kindness and respect. Either one of you would make a great governor. I would also like to thank Governor Hoppy for his questions today. To address one issue that a fellow candidate brought up, I want to stress the importance of accessible transportation for Tennesseans. While I highly support the funding and use of electric transportation, this is simply not an accessible option for all income brackets. Moving on, in closing, I believe that I am the best candidate for this position because I have a clear vision for the future and plans to make that future happen. As governor, I intend to work with my talented colleagues to find solutions to these difficult problems. I hope that you will let me have the privilege of serving as your governor. Thank you.
And with that, I will now pass the mic back over to Tyler Dorr.
Thank you, Governor Hoppy. If I may conclude the night with a couple of quick thank yous. First, to our moderator this evening, Governor Hoppy. Excellent job, great questions. We really appreciate you making the time to be here. Next, to all of our candidates. After a year full of listening to all sorts of people talk about all sorts of things, the most hopeful that I have felt is during these debates listening to the wonderful ideas that you all have for the future. The thank yous that you issued to the CCE are appreciated, but in truth, we are the ones that feel thankful that we get to work with such bright and special young people. I cannot wait until the day that you are leading Tennessee. Finally, a thank you to all of our delegates. You certainly have your work cut out for you, choosing between these fine candidates. I encourage you to check out the app for candidate op-eds and more election information, as well as any social media handles that the candidates have put in the description below. Have a wonderful rest of the conference, and we will see you soon.